globally, we see a lot of these binaries, these systems of power and oppression, this hierarchy that you've already alluded to all around the world. Look at South Africa, right, and the racial system that happened there, and with apartheid, and that still exists today. And I remember when I was living in Cape Town, still seeing a multiracial or biracial couple, however you want to label it. I'm not a big fan of labels, because often it's just used to sell things and sometimes sell stories that hurt and even endanger people. But anyways, in South Africa, I saw a biracial couple walking down the street, right, and people just staring like, what? That it's still very much a reality. It's not true that that's all of South Africa, but it's still very palpable, I think, in the air, some of those everyday tensions that exist, even down to the pencil test with hair and putting a pencil in someone's fro to see if it drops out, and that qualifies whether they're white or white enough or how white they are in this system. And we know that exists, that kind of feeling, that kind of it's very clear, it's very common when I had friends with my friends there, or conversations with my friends there, that we have a divide and conquer mentality also amongst each other, that then allows that system to be more powerful, right? That empowers that system to continue to carry on versus questioning it. When we look at a global perspective now, I think some of the things that we're seeing also with France, we'll see how it plays out, but also I was in Copenhagen earlier this summer. They also had what they called terrorist attacks, and it's used also in the way that it's framed in order to shape the language that then can dehumanize people and cause a higher rise in nationalist politics. The Donald Trumps of the world, so to speak, right? That use different kinds of rhetoric to dehumanize people, and we're seeing that all around the world, especially right now. And that Black Lives Matter movement, I just met organizers who are doing similar work in France, and to know that that's global, right? That we're not separate from each other. And I think sometimes when I talk about global things, people are like, well, what does that have to do with me here right now? I think about MLK when he talks about, think about through your morning and all the things that you've used and where all the different places in the world that's touched or been in contact with, right? Everything from your toothpaste to what you have for breakfast to the sheets you were laying on, all these things, right? That we're so connected in that. And if we want to talk about solidarity, we can't just focus on, it's important to have our ecosystems and our communities locally, but also to know that there's a global solidarity that's possible and that can be a huge catalyst for this change. I think it's definitely true that walking with American privilege, so to speak, definitely has its weight in the world, but I also think it can be countered by going beyond a narrative, as one of the professors I met in Scotland recently put it, of like a hero versus victim narrative. A lot of these frameworks, the way that we're understanding and reading the media, one level is the reading, and I just want to really carry over the point that it goes into our actions, right? Our beliefs then translate into how we interact on a daily basis. So I worked in the public school district here for years, and worked in special education. I had a student who was autistic, had echolalia, so sometimes he would speak to himself, right? Or it would seem like he was speaking to himself. And one of the substitute teachers got frustrated because she felt like African-American young student, and she felt like he was disrespecting the classroom. And she told him to stop, and he wasn't able to respond in the way that she wanted him to, right? Eventually, I wasn't even in the classroom, I was just walking down the hall. I see him in the hallway screaming, and she's on the phone. And I ask, what's going on here? And she's like, he's talking, and I don't understand what he's saying, and I'm calling the police. This boy, right, he was like 12 years old, somewhere around there. I'm calling the police because he wasn't responding the way she wanted to, because she was reading his body and feeling threatened from maybe some of those news stories, maybe some of that psychological impact of the racist ideologies that we are imbued with, and that comes into everyday actions, even down to my mom not being able to wear her fro at PTA meetings because she noticed that the other moms and the parents wouldn't treat her equally, right? She was afraid. Right, and what does it mean for me as an artist? The question I'm really focusing on now is then, what does liberation look like? What does it feel like? I want to imagine that and write that into existence so that we can create that, because we don't just write verses, we write universes, right? What world do we want to manifest? I think that's so key, and a lot of my vision is focused on being critical of those systems, but also where do we want to go next, and how do we do that collectively?